They don't even have them anymore.
Toque?
They're called ASCs now, but they
The trainmen used to wear it?
the trainmen used to.
Oh, yeah,
wear,
okay.
I'm from-
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah.
Conductors.
The conductors,
yeah.
conductor's
Yeah.
hats, yeah. I've got one of those at home, but anyway, so what's your full name?
Howard Arthur Lynds.
Howard Art.
Are you taping now? Oh, no. Start again.
We didn't do the makeup.
No, well, I am Howard Arthur Lynds,
Yeah.
and my father's name was Arthur Lloyd Lynds,
Okay.
and my father's brother was Howard Russell Lynds, and they were all born in Nova Scotia. And my grandfather was Harvey Newton Lynds, and he was a Nova Scotia fella, and he was working for the railway in Nova Scotia. And he decided that he would like to come and see the Wild West. So he came out west to Beaver, Manitoba, which is north of McGregor. And his wife had her mother living with her. She had bad arthritis, so she had to stay and look after her mother. So Harvey come out here by himself, and the kids were all in Nova Scotia, but Grandma died, and so they came out to live at Beaver also. But my dad was 13 or 14 years old. He was working at Spencer's lumber yard. Spencer's mill, actually. His job was to go out on the river and haul the logs up to the conveyor. But then the First World War broke out, and him and his friend decided that they would join the army. But they were underage, so he was 16. He had a parent signature. The parents wouldn't sign for him, but his friends' parents signed, and he went over, and in 2 years he was killed in the First World War. So Dad, Harvey Newton Lynds out in Beaver said, well, if Arthur doesn't want to go to school, send him out here. There's lots of work out here, because all the farm boys were going to join the army, and they were short of. In the old days, they had to physically remove the crop with stooks and steam engine. They used to have to haul water. But Dad got off the train in Beaver and was standing on the platform with Harvey, and they were harvesting right across the track, and there's a big fight broke out, and one guy was kicked off the harvest crew, and Dad says, go over there, you get a job right away. He went over and he's hired right there. Didn't even get off the train hardly, he had a job out here. But he, at 18, he hired on the CM. Well, it was probably the Great Northern then. And he worked various places, and he met a farm girl called Letitia Maud McCrae, which became Lynds.
Around what time is this?
That would be when about 1919 or 1920, and she was a farm girl outside of Caterham, which is right close to Beaver. And her dad always thought that Arthur was a show-off, because he would come to see Lita, and he'd never open the gate, he'd jump over the fence. So he thought he was a bit of a show-off. But he worked as a telegraph operator and a station agent. But anyway, my career started actually when I was born, because for the first 18 years I lived in railway stations.
Right.
I lived in Scarth, till I was about 3, and then we moved to Plumas for a couple of years, then we went to Brunkhill, and then we went back to Plumas, and we went to Pine Falls, and that's where I finished up school, was in Pine Falls. And then I knew the Morris Key here very well, and all right, Winnipeg. This is Winnipeg, Manitoba. In Manitoba. And here's Josh. And on and on. And I knew that when I was just a wee little guy, and actually my sister Carol was a better operator than I was.
Mhm.
She really, really took to it.
Right.
And I never really remember learning it, I just learned it. The same as learning how to talk.
Yeah.
And so I was too busy running around with my friends and going to school, and I, 3 or 4 years I neglected it and didn't know that much with station work. The station agent was an accountant, mainly. Bookkeeper, accountant with the railway and shipping and receiving and billing and all this stuff. And the telegraph part was copying train orders for trains.
Right.
And receiving telegrams, because there was very few phones and everything those days. It was all done by telegraph. And I wasn't feeling confident about going out as agent operator, so I went into Winnipeg and I hired on an extra gang working on the track for this. I thought I'd work for the summer, and then come back and spend the winter with Dad in the office and learn everything that I could. And I was way up at close to Churchill as we go on. I bought my boots and got all ready to go, and Dad got a phone call from the dispatcher's office saying, Art, do you know that your son is in here hiring on an extra gang? And Dad said, oh yes, he's be heading out in a couple of days. He says, for heaven's sake, send him in here to see us. He said, we're just dying for operators. We're way behind in relieving station agents and operators. And of course they would come to the station to visit Dad, and they knew all about me with Morse code and that. So I went in, and they said, we need you, we'll start you out right away. And so they took me in and gave me a test, the telegraph, and I copied everything down. They said, well, you're hired. And so I went to Scarth as a night operator, and I was greener than the grass growing in the yard there at Scarth.
Yeah.
But Wally Cox was the agent. He was very patient, and I learned on the job. Literally learned on the job. And I worked for 5 years on the spare board. Oh, here's my hat. How's that? 5 years on the spare board, and if there's enough time, I'll read you all the places that I worked. My first job was Scarth, and interesting enough, the monthly rate of pay was $314.74 a month, which was about roughly $2 an hour. But that wage was a really good wage for those days.
Yeah.
So I worked at Scarth, Lang Ruth. Most of them were agent operator jobs and operator jobs. There's a few towerman's jobs in here. Scarth, Lang Ruth, Shiloh, Carberry, back to Lang Ruth, Monroe Tower, Finley Crossing Tower, West Winnipeg Tower, and I worked at Miami relieving Uncle Howard. Back to Scarth, Carville, Alberta, Gainford, Alberta, back to Carville, Alberta, Neepawa Towerman, back to Scarth again. I worked at Paddington, which was on the approach to Symington Yard. Amaranth, Maryfield, Rhine, Saskatchewan, Transcona, Rainy River, Ontario, Warroad, Minnesota, Wawanesa, Manitoba, Brandon, First Street, West Winnipeg, Towerman again, back to Amaranth, then at Pine Falls, Kipling, Pine Falls again, back to Kipling, Notre Dame de Lourdes, Sulligout, Ontario, Roxton, Saskatchewan, Watrous, Saskatchewan, Rossburn, Yarbo, Emerson Junction, Reddit, Ontario, Gibsonville, Oakville, back to Yarbo, Laurier, Savannah Lake, Ontario, Hudson, Ontario, Young, Saskatchewan, St. Lazare, Carmen, Yarbo, and then I met a little 16-year-old girl near Waldersea, Manitoba. And that was the end of my single days.
Yeah.
And I met her in '62. We got married in '64. And I thought, well, I can't be running all over the country being married.
Yeah.
So, and I couldn't hold anything down here. I never had enough seniority. So I managed to bid in Gillam, Manitoba, which is south of Churchill. I was there for 2 years. And then I managed to bid in the operator's job at Yarbo, Saskatchewan, which is near Esterhazy, and that was the big potash mine at Cutarm in Yarbo. And I was there until 4 years I was there. And at that time they started closing up railway stations left and right, and I could see there's no future in operator and agent jobs. And so I managed to get a job here in Winnipeg at the Quality Control Center here in the depot, where they just started the keeping track of cars, box cars, and all the cars. And we were supposed to be, we were the quality control people, and we'd have a box car would leave, let's say, Winnipeg, and it would end up in Regina, but it was no record of it halfway between, it disappeared, but then it showed up again. So we had to find where the error was.
Right. And what sort of telegrams would you have to send?
It was all teletype. It was, we used to punch card. You had the punch card system in quality control. Yeah. And we'd sit down and punch the cards out, then you take it down to the data center and they'd run it, and all that stuff would come out at Melville or wherever.
Right. Was it all related to trains or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Running equipment.
Right.
Yeah. And then quality control, they thought that the error lists were this tall when we first went in there every day. And we got it down to about there, and they thought, well, that's good enough. And so they closed up the quality control, and I went to the CN Express.
The airlifts, like the
air listings, yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, there'd be a car missing here, and we would have to find where the error. Mostly it was wrong car numbers.
Yeah.
Because then it was done manually, writing down of all the cars, and somebody would miss a number. But then they got the scanners.
Right.
And they use scanners now. Yeah. And the trains would run by the scanner and record all the car numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I went to the Express, and that was the Express Western Region headquarters. And I started as a payroll clerk and ended up working in the making budgets in the budget department with Ed Zamek. And then the Express went kind of belly up, and so I went to be, the last job I had was a crew dispatcher, calling train crews at Rainy River. I had Rainy River. Every terminal used to have a crew office that looked after the crews in that terminal. Then the railway said, well, that's very inefficient. So they abolished all those jobs, and they had a big office that ran called Crews from Winnipeg.
You know, they're talking about abolishing the Winnipeg crew color and
that's gone.
out of Montreal.
That's
for
gone.
Via for the passengers.
It's run out of Edmonton now, isn't it?
We have our crew color in Winnipeg.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we do. But
Yeah.
they're talking about moving it all to Montreal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Constantly getting into bigger and bigger offices.
Yeah. Yeah,
Further
and
further
so
away.
that was 1965. I pulled the pin, and I've been retired ever since.
And when were you in Miami?
Miami, Uncle Howard was still there. That was June 18, 1960 to July the 20th. Uncle Howard was on vacation. Yeah, 1960.
Mm-hmm. And Grandpa was telling me that he seemed to remember that the station closed after.
Yeah.
After he left.
Yeah, it was, I'm not sure when it closed, but they were closing stations left and right in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Mom and Dad and Carol and I were visiting Uncle Howard and Aunt Evelyn, and Donnie was still around at Altamont. And I was pretty young, and I thought Donnie was clear cat's meow. At nighttime, he was going out with a girl called Marjorie in town. So she came over, and then Donnie and her disappeared. And I looked in the freight shed, I looked all over for him, and I found him and Marjorie sitting in the waiting room in the dark. And I said, "What are you doing out here in the dark?" And Donnie says, "Get out of here." So I went and asked Uncle Howard, why is Donnie sitting in the dark in the waiting room? And Uncle Howard said, "Well, he just would like to be alone for a while."
Yeah.
So that was one funny thing. But
yeah, did you remember any other stories of Don, early Don?
well, Donnie, my dad was a station agent at Plumas, and they had a night clerk, a night man come on at night to meet the passenger trains. And Donnie had a motorcycle, a Harley, and he came across the Hood Bridge Road, which was all mud then, from Altamont, and he come across there, and it was, he said he had to drag the motorcycle half the way across there, and he used to go through farmers' fences and through fields because the road, he couldn't drive on it, it was so muddy. And I come home from school at lunch. "Is Donnie here yet?" "No." Come home from school at supper time, after school. "Is Donnie here yet?" "No." And he pulled in about 9 o'clock at night, and he was just a mess, mud. And he walked in the door and he sat on the floor. He was just exhausted. Yeah. So he worked at nights, and Donnie was a pretty good hockey player those days. Oh yeah, he played hockey with the Plumas hockey team.
What position?
Plumas Pirates. I think those days you played all positions. Yeah. Well, not goaltender, of course, but they were very impressed with Donnie. Mm-hmm. And so he was there all winter working. And one time he went up to see his sister Marjorie. No, Norma, at Kamsack. And he went on the passenger train, and his motorcycle was sitting there, and Dad said, "To see if I can take the motorcycle." So, all right. So he took it. He said, "Don't tell Donnie." He took the motorcycle down Main Street and come around and come back. I pushed it, and he steered it and put it back at where it was supposed to be. He said, "Don't tell Donnie I took it for a ride."
Did you ever find out?
Well, I told him years ago. Yeah. And then next winter, the hockey players are asked, "Is Donnie coming back? Is Donnie going to come back?" Mm-hmm. We need him for a hockey player. Yeah. But he was somewhere else. Shortly after that, I think he went to Thompson. He was in Thompson for years.
Oh yeah. He was in Thompson for 18 years, he said.
Yeah. And then we were in Gillum from 64 to 66. I worked as an operator, and at least twice, maybe 3 times, we got on the passenger train and went to Thompson. We stayed at Donnie's. Mm-hmm. And the train got in there about 8 o'clock in the morning, and Donnie drove us to, and we had a little Brent, 2 or 3 years old. And Donnie drove us to the house, and then he said, "You can have the car, just drive me back to work." So we had the car all day. It which was very nice. And one of Donnie's girls was kind of infatuated with little Brent. And so the next day, she said she was sick. Couldn't go to school, she was sick. And do you remember who that would be? No, you would. You weren't even born then, probably.
Nope. Maybe Lori?
Janice.
I kind of forget who. I used to know who the girl was. And,
Kathy, Janice, Lori.
Terry?
well, anyway, Marjorie made her go to bed and kept her in bed all day long.
Yeah.
And so it just ruined her whole day. If you're sick, you go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I mentioned that a few times when I see some of them.
Some of the girls.
And then 2 or 3 times we did that in the 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never got to Churchill because I was always meeting the passenger trains and working.
Yeah.
And on holidays, I wanted to get out of there and come to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And you know, I'd come to Winnipeg, get off the train, and the place just stunk, just awful.
Yeah.
Exhaust fumes, and I just couldn't believe how horrible it smelled in here.
Yeah. Compared to the
and
small-
Gillam was all fresh air. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
beautiful air, clean air.
Thompson usually.
Well, Thompson had the smokestack, but
The smokestack, yeah, but yeah.
yeah.
So these keys, do you recognize any of these keys?
Well, the switch key. I know there's a switch key on here, and these other keys are probably strongbox keys.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
And the strong box was on
The express. Well, we as operators we had to unload the express car, help the express messenger unload the express cars, and the baggage car also,
Mhm.
for people's baggage.
Mhm.
And of course we had to load cream, anything from the farms, like cream would be sent to the creameries. And at Shiloh was the worst. We had, it was on the Shiloh military base. And we had to load up huge sacks of laundry. They would
Mhm.
ship it out to get it clean.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny they couldn't clean it there, but and then coming back, and that was heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But the express messengers, I was always impressed because they had sidearms hanging on their waists, just like the old cowboys.
Yeah. Did you ever run into any problems?
Well, apparently at Gillam, before I got there, somebody robbed the payroll, $6,000 payroll. But where in the heck are you going to go at Gillam? They found him about 15 miles down the track. The RCMP.
Yeah.
So he didn't get very far.
Yeah.
And then at Shiloh, the payroll come in. They used to send cash in into the bank to pay the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And the express messenger started unloading. Oh, I had to sign for all this stuff too, and there was packages of bills, and bag after bag after bag of coin,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, there was a lot of money there. And so I took it into the station, and put the bills and everything into the safe, and locked the safe, and piled the coin up around the safe. And I was there all by myself for about 6 hours. And then 8 o'clock in the morning comes the military police, escort, arms, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the funniest thing, here I am sitting there all by myself. And the military took it from, well, it was CN's responsibility up to that point, so they didn't care if I got robbed or not.
Right.
But there was an armed guard that took it to the banks,
Yeah.
and the soldiers would all line up and get paid.
Yeah.
And I was staying in the officers' quarters, and they had it was a they used to go out and fire these cannons off. It wasn't cannons, what do you call them? Howitzers or something?
I'm not
And it would
too
be just boom, 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 and the windows would be rattling and everything else. And they'd be practicing firing these field guns off. Yeah,
Yeah. That's in where?
Shiloh.
In Shiloh.
Yeah, and that's where our Winnipeg Princess Pat's went from the Papillon Barracks here.
Okay.
They moved them out to Shiloh about 5-6 years ago, and they've been fighting all this time with the natives want that land.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a big government still owns it, but they all moved out to Shiloh. And so that's pretty much it. I got tons of stories, and some of them aren't very nice.
What are give me one of
I
the
was,
not so
I was
nice
working.
ones.
I was working at Reddit, Ontario. I went uptown and I came back, and there was a native fella and a girl sitting in the waiting room drinking beer. And I said, "You can't drink beer in here." Oh well, and you know. And I said, "No, you have to get out." So they went outside, and the native lady laid on the track, one hand on this rail and her body across the other rail, and you could hear the train coming. You can hear them coming for 5-6 miles away. And I said, what do you do? And she says, she didn't say anything, and her so-called friend there just stood back and did nothing. And they hear the train coming, so I went and wrestled with her and got her off. Got her off the track, and as soon as I let go, she went right back. So I had to sit on her. So the head end crew saw me holding this girl down, and they radioed the tail end. The tail end went by. They're all standing on the caboose.
Yeah.
And here I was.
Wow.
And so she went back, let her go, right back on the track again. So I went in the station. They called the OPP in Kenora, and as soon as they saw the police car coming around the bend, they were just smarting right up, eh?
Yeah.
But they took him back and put him in the jail overnight in Kenora. A couple of days later, I was walking uptown Kenora, and I met this fella, and he said that he was going to kill me because he called the police on him.
Wow.
But he never did because I'm still here.
Yeah.
But I got all kinds of stories about up on that north line there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any close calls, like?
Not really.
No.
No. Yeah.
What are some of your other?
And then up at Savant Lake, the Pickle Crow gold mine used to bring in bars of gold to ship out CN Express.
Really?
And they would come every week. They'd come with 2 boxes, about that high and that long, and about that wide, wooden boxes. And it was big bars of gold, and they were shipping it to the mint in Ottawa
Yeah.
from the gold mine.
And
That
you got to move you were moving them.
Well, they'd give it to me, and I'd
Yeah.
send them CN Express,
Yeah.
and give it to the messenger on the train, and he would sign for it. Well, I've always had to have signatures.
Any other interesting freight that you had to sign off on? I know Grandpa was talking to me about some pretty gruesome stuff with the
Derailments.
bodies and things like
Derailments.
that. Or not even. Oh yeah, you've been through derailments.
No, but I've seen my dad in about 1944. There was a real bad one at Dougal out here. The passenger train. Well, they got mixed up anyway, and there's a head-on collision. And they blamed the operator for it,
Oh really?
but it actually wasn't his fault. They were sitting on the wrong track.
Oh.
And it was steam engines, and it was a real mess. You know.
Yeah.
Remember, Dad went from Brunkild, and he was going to go and have a look at this derailment. I wanted to go. He said, "No, you shouldn't see that."
Mm-hmm.
So I missed out on that one. But there was lots up north of Gillum. They'd dump grain cars in the ditch,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing. No, the passenger trains were usually okay on their travels. But years ago, everything moved by rail. Everything till 1950, and we were at Plumas. Dad was the agent at Plumas. Uncle Howard was the agent at Altamont. I don't know if Donnie was up at Thompson yet or not. Probably not. No, he wouldn't be. In 1950, they went on strike, and they were all working 12-hour days, 6 days a week with 1 day off. So they went on strike, and they ended up with the 40-hour week, work 8 hours, 2 days off. But in the small towns, the station was the center of everything came in and out of town, went through the station. And the strike lasted 10 days, and Uncle Howard and Aunt Evelyn came down from Altamont, and we were standing on the platform, and I was concerned. I'd be 8 or 9 years old, 9 years old, I guess. The rails were getting rusty. I was concerned about these rails, and Uncle Howard says, "Oh, the first train over that they'll all be shiny again," Howard, he said.
Yeah.
But there was a guy in town with a truck. He used to go to the farms and pick up cattle and take them to the stockyards in St. Boniface.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stores had a shipment sitting in the warehouse here in Winnipeg, and he couldn't get it because there's no trains running. So he asked George if he'd pick that up and bring it. And George, well, sure, he could do that. So he brought this out, and the light bulb went off. Why, I'm hauling cattle in, why should I come back empty?
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the stores, and we lost a lot of business.
Oh.
That was the start of the end of Express Company.
Mm-hmm.
But and every town eventually had local transfers, guys running transfers, hauling groceries and
Right.
hauling everything by truck.
Was there just more roads being built?
Yeah, well, I read a letter one time that Dad wrote to Uncle Howard, and he was in Oka River then, Uncle Howard. And he was saying that the Plumas Road, it was 12 miles out to number 4 highway, or number 16 it is now, I guess. And that was blocked all winter. They never plowed it.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad said he was waiting anxious for spring to come to melt the snow so he could get the car out on the road again.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Like there was roads,
And-
but
and-
not upkeep.
yeah, well, he never plowed anything.
Yeah.
And the school in Plumas, they would, the school bus was a team of horses and a covered sleigh,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a stove on there with a pipe sticking out the top.
Really?
And that's how they picked the kids up.
Seriously?
And I used to run like heck west of Plumas after school to meet the school horse-drawn school bus
Mhm.
come back, and I would ride back,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd let me drive the team.
Was it called the school bus still?
No, it wasn't called the school bus. It was a sleigh, I guess.
A
School
sleigh.
Sleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, had four big sleighs, four skids on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd help him on his horses and take the harness off and that. No, that was the greatest time in your life was living in a small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, you knew everybody. Everybody knew you. You did something wrong, your parents would know right away.
Yeah. And most of these towns, the vast majority are in Manitoba, right?
Yeah, most of them,
Mhm.
and some of them
Ontario.
in Alberta.
Oh yeah.
We were short of operators in Alberta, and 5 of us operators went out there, and only 2 came back.
Mm-hmm.
The others stayed out there and worked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of a little bit curious about the telegraph bug. Do you remember Howard Russell's telegraph bug?
Yeah,
that they made.
I gave my dad's bug to the museum at Winnipeg
Mhm.
Depot there.
Well, apparently the other one is in the museum in Miami.
Oh, yeah, it's
The museum
okay.
there.
Which is a good place for it.
It's locked away in a safe actually.
Oh yeah.
Down. Grandpa went to go take a look, but the person there didn't know how to get into the safe. So hopefully when I go check it out, I can have a peek at
Yeah,
it.
it's a device that had weights on it, and you go back and forth like this, and so you could just send 3 times as fast
Really?
as you would on a hand key,
Just because of the design of it.
because it was quicker. And some of these guys that worked in the Y office, which is commercial, everybody sent telegrams, and they could just rattle that off. In fact, that I had to tell them to slow down. I couldn't read it that fast.
Yeah.
They weren't so fast. Yeah. And I worked at Notre Dame. I was getting messages in French, and I didn't know what the heck they were there. So I'd take it deliver it to the guy. He says, "Can you read it?" He says, "Oh yeah, yeah." But I never knew what was on it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And there was all the telegraph stuff that you did was train business.
And then they had RS messages, which were company messages.
Mm-hmm.
And they would send me an RS message if I was in one town that my next place to go would be wherever.
Mm-hmm. And get your
The RS messages, they were free, but the commercial messages, people had to pay to send those. So much a word.
Right.
Yeah. And they would come into Plumas, and Dad would get me to deliver them. Most of the time he got me to deliver the messages.
Mm-hmm.
Telegrams. Yeah.
So maybe that's how you learned it growing up. It was
Yeah.
like doing the sending these off. Did you
Well,
actually operate the...
no. They would come in, and Dad would copy them on the typewriter,
Mm-hmm.
and then put it in an envelope and send me to deliver it to the person who was addressed to.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my Aunt Olga McLaughlin, that was Arthur and Howard's sister,
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Olga, she lived to be 102, 103, or 104 or something. 102 maybe.
Yeah.
She was and of course, like I was saying, that they come out to Beaver to be with Harvey Newton Lynds, who I never met because I think he died when he was 52 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they were living in the station at Beaver with him, and Olga she was really a good telegraph operator. She learned.
Oh, really?
And she would talk to the operators all up and down the line. They'd be talking on the telegraph. And one time Harvey had gone out somewhere, maybe to McGregor or somewhere, and the train dispatcher was having a fit. They had to get a train order for this train that was coming. So Olga copied it on the proper forms and everything and gave it to the train.
Mm-hmm.
No problem.
Yeah. Even though she wasn't...
No, she was no employee or
Yeah.
employee or nothing. just the agent's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then there was Enid. They were in DeBert, Nova Scotia, and Howard went to work in Boston, and Enid, his sister, went to work in Boston, and Dad came out here. But there was Carrie, who lived all her life in DeBert. And Ethelwyn, she lived in DeBert. There was 6 of them, yeah. Yeah. They married and lived in DeBert all those years.
I have a text file on my computer from Grandpa about something about Ethelwyn and Eldred.
Yeah. Eldred worked on the railway as a carpenter.
Really?
And he would go to stations and bridges, repair bridges, wooden bridges, and repair
The B&B.
yeah,
Oh,
bridge
yeah.
and building. Yeah,
Bridge and building, yeah.
yeah, he worked there.
Oh, okay.
He was a very quiet fellow, the nicest fellow, but man of very few words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ethelwyn did all the talking for him. The Lynds all talked.
Yeah.
We'd go and visit. They'd all get together, and it'd be Howard Arthur, and Howard, and Olga, and Ethelwyn. And Enid was in California, so she very seldom joined in. But they all talk at once, and I can never figure out how they could know what the other one was saying.
Yeah.
And Mum and I, and Carol got the gift of the gab too.
Mm-hmm.
But my mum and I would sit there and wouldn't get a word in edgeways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'd stay up all night. We'd go to Altamont there, and Howard and my dad, they'd go to bed at 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Just
And then that would be Saturday night, and we'd be eating ice cream at 3 o'clock in the morning. They'd go across the street and buy a big, and they'd eat all this ice cream.
Yeah.
And that was their entertainment, was getting together with each other. They all got along so well with each other.
Oh, that's nice.
And one time, my dad was the agent at Plumas, and when after the strike was over, of course, Dad was very concerned because all the farmers come into town on Saturday mostly, and they'd come to do their business at the station on Saturday. Now the station's closed
Mm-hmm.
because of the 40-hour week. But if they came to the back door, Dad would always give them their parcel or whatever. But one time, Simon, a guy that lived up around Glenella, he had expecting a parcel or something to come in, and he spent all day Saturday in the pub in Plumas, and he was come over to the station. He was banging on the door, yelling and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
So Dad went out on the platform and said that, well, if he had been nice, he'd have got his parcel.
Yeah.
Dad says, no, we're closed. And quit banging on the door. And so the fists started flying. And Dad, there was a farmhouse across from the track, and the farmer was out, he saw this, and Dad knocked him right down, bang.
Yeah.
And so then he had to come next week to get his parcel. But then I was walking uptown, and some of the more aggressive men in town said to little me, well, your dad's getting pretty damn smart over there. He says, if he wants to fight somebody, come and fight me. Then you'll have a fight, you know. And all this was going on.
Wow.
But back then in Nova Scotia, Dad was telling me, there was always fights going on.
Really?
You ever hear the story about that guy has a chip on his shoulder?
Yeah, I've heard that expression, yeah.
Well, down there was a lot of lumber mills, and there was wood chips laying around.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wanted to fight, I'd put a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And then if another guy thought, well, let's have some fun, so you knock the chip off your shoulder and the fight's on.
Wow.
And there's all kinds and so Uncle Howard and Dad, they knew how to fight,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they were in fights.
So they're scrappers back in
But
Nova
Uncle
Scotia.
Howard was, he was a powerful man, Uncle Howard. He had big wrists and heavy shoulders, stocky
Mhm.
fella. He was
Yeah.
strong,
Yeah.
strong man. Yeah. He'd grab your hand, boy, you knew you had a handshake. And he would see what kind of strength you got. He'd just keep applying pressure. He'd shake hands with Elaine sometimes, and she had her wedding rings on,
Mm-hmm.
her ring on, and it would hurt her. He would just squeeze it.
Yeah.
Tell you.
Until you stopped, yeah.
Yeah.
So what was he like? Just how did you?
Very, very nice man.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was always so nice to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go over to Altamont, and we'd go over to the Morden Lake and have picnics when I was kids. And we had a great time. We're always going back and forth to visit Gordon and Olga McLaughlin, Don and Margaret McIntosh, which is my mother's sister,
Mm-hmm.
and my Aunt Jean and Uncle Fred Lake on the farm. And you always wore suits.
Always wore suits?
When you went out, the men would all wear suits and a hat, and the women to be all dressed
Mm-hmm.
to the nines, they used to call it.
Yeah. No, still do.
And we'd go out to the farm with Gator, and I even had a little suit to wear.
Yeah.
We all wore suits.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Different now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, I hope it didn't take up too much of your time.
No, not at all. No, I think I got some.
But
good-
Donnie might know some of
I
these
guess
keys.
Yeah. No, Don doesn't really remember. He was saying there were like desk keys and.
Oh yeah, that's right.